In the psychology of the modern civilized human being, it is difficult to overstate the significance of the house. Perhaps it is due in some small part to seeing them as a reflection of ourselves.
Houses hold us within their walls and keep us safe. We have an intimate relationship with the places we live in. We close our eyes at night and entrust the house to protect us at our most vulnerable. Houses are clearly essential for life. Maslow labels shelter as one of our most essential needs. But houses aren't just a place to live in. They're a place to imbue with meaning, memory, nostalgia. So what happens when a house betrays that trust? What happens when a home becomes haunted? The German word unheimlich means unhomely or uncanny. This is the phenomenon of something familiar being turned unsettling, wrong. It's not surprising that haunted houses are often depicted with strange architecture. Twisting hallways that make no sense, walls jutting out at odd angles that defy logic. Designed to make its inhabitants lose their way and shatter their sense of control. The haunted house puts up a facade of familiarity while harbouring nothing but malcontent. For children growing up in abusive households, what should be safe and familiar twists into a cage where danger can lurk around any corner. Their homes become haunted. Without going into too much detail, my childhood home wasn't the happiest of places, and something has always drawn me to the haunted house. There's something about these fictional hostile environments that invoke such a visceral feeling of familiarity within me, one that provides me with both catharsis and validation. If you've had a similar childhood, then I hope I can share some of this catharsis with you. And if you can't relate, then I hope the topic is still of interest, as we explore how the home can entangle with trauma to provide a hellscape from which there may be no escape. That rhymed. Kitty Horror Show is an indie game developer whose work centers around haunted settings. Her games often involve exploring well-crafted environments while reading evocative snippets of text. Most of her games are free to play, so I definitely recommend checking them out. Because of her incredible writing talent, it's not surprising that her Haunted Cities bundle contains a short story alongside her other games. This story, Cicadia, is about a woman with the ability to disappear into the worlds of her VHS tapes. However, one of these tapes depicts the image of a house before ejecting itself. She climbs into a different tape in order to investigate the afflicted one, and finds herself in a Kafkaesque nightmare of hundreds of basements, conjoined at the shoulders and elbows and cheeks. As she presses forward through these warped houses, she realizes she's entered her childhood home. The house gets personified as being villainous. She's pressing her face against the side of the house and screaming because the house put its own sadness into her veins and it's the only thing she can think to do. And then she's on the floor, knees grinding the carpet, shoulders shaking, eyeliner bleeding down her face, screaming into her palms. She has no way back to her apartment, and she can't think of any endings. Still screaming into her hands, still mocked by the house and all who pretend to remain there. And she's still there. I feel like I can safely assume our protagonist has experienced childhood trauma, that the pain of it has bled into the bricks of the house and has made her an eternal prisoner. Even now that she's moved out to her own apartment, she will always remain at that house. Moving on to an actual game by Kitty, Grandmother's Garden opens with our protagonist standing in, would you believe it or not, Grandmother's Garden. Behind her is a house where you can uncover several disturbing things. including a holy book, the extracts of which help set the theme of childhood abuse and parasitic relationships. The boy came to a clearing where a great bloating tick wallowed in a shallow pond, and he found that he could not speak, for she had filled his mouth with leeches. Turning away from the book to talk to Grandma, she seems a touch neglectful, refusing to speak to you in favour of watching TV, prayer shows, and footage of leech farms. The granddaughter comments, "I don't like her very much, but I suppose that means she belongs here. She's a part of this place. I'm a part of this place too. I don't like thinking about that." The grandma, the granddaughter, and the environment are all one, rotting together as a whole. This reminds me of a quote from a game called Return by Maxine Sophia Wolf. "If the ground beneath my feet is living mycelium, what then are houses? Spores that rise from the earth, open and wet? And what then is a house that is haunted?" The only response you can cry from Grandma is her splatting her blood against the wall in a formation that reads, "Get digging." I don't know about you, but I always obey messages written in blood, so I set out to find a shovel. This is the only third-person game in Kitty's collection, with controls reminiscent of old survival horror games such as Silent Hill. These game mechanics made me incredibly lost. I almost felt helpless, not knowing where to turn to or how to proceed, and as I kept getting stuck between two trees, it felt as if the environment truly hated me. Eventually, I stumbled upon a garden lined with tombstones. As the granddaughter comments on each one, it becomes apparent that the grandmother has a penchant for murder, one she forces her granddaughter to partake in. An extortionist is buried here. I don't like remembering this one. I had to carve up the faces of 100 coins to bury with the body. My knife kept slipping and cutting my fingers. I cried and got shouted at for it. I was too young. She shouldn't have made me help her. The granddaughter being forced to assist in a murder at an inappropriately young age, if that is an appropriate age for murder, feels oddly familiar. I've been here before, metaphorically. I've been forced to carry out orders at a young age by a family who hate me and an environment that wants to swallow me whole. I've been here in my nightmares too, which is apt considering this game is an attempt to recreate one of Kitty's recurring nightmares. Perhaps we cross paths in the astral plane. These murders serve a purpose. They feed the garden, and they keep grandmother's taproot growing. The garden lives off its inhabitants like a parasite, just like the grandmother lives off the granddaughter, forcing her to carry out these blood sacrifices while she sits inside and watches TV. Unsurprisingly, our protagonist wants to leave this place. When encountering a well, she ponders. I've often wondered what would happen if I jumped down into it. Maybe I'd be carried away by the current to another place. Or maybe I'd just break apart against the stones as I fell. I'm too scared to try. Her fear holds her back from estranging herself, so with nothing left to do, she follows her orders to dig. She doesn't feel comfortable doing what she's been told to do. I have a bad feeling. I don't want to keep doing this, but what else is there to do? There's nowhere to hide, so she digs, and digs, and digs, and she had dug her own grave. She was fated to fall, fated for her blood to feed her grandmother's garden. If our protagonist from Grandmother's Garden had jumped down the well, would she have truly escaped? The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson suggests it might not be so simple. The protagonist, Eleanor, is forced to look after her ill and abusive mother. If it's not her mum she's obedient to, then it's her controlling sister. She's always been stifled beneath somebody's thumb. When her mother dies, Eleanor tries to establish an identity for herself for the first time in her life. A scientific investigation is being conducted on a haunted house, and the study is looking for participants. And so Eleanor steals her sister's car and drives to the house. As is seemingly necessary to be a haunted house, it's built like a maze and designed at odd angles, making its inhabitants feel ill at ease and disorientated, as if the architecture itself is evil. I need more alcohol. Unfortunately, Eleanor doesn't get the escape she was looking for. Instead, her past follows her. She is distressed by pounding on the walls, and after it ceases, Eleanor confesses that her mother didn't die of old age. It was my fault my mother died. She knocked on the wall and called me, and I never woke up. I ought to have brought her the medicine. I always did before, but this time she called me, and I never woke up. The guilt of her actions haunt her, perhaps manifesting as supernatural occurrences. Interestingly, the house was built by a man named Henry Crane, who was abusive to his children too. I mean, the man includes a Goya painting in his diary. It's as if his abuse poisoned the very foundation of the house, and it has lingered to haunt whoever enters it now. Eleanor is unstable from the get-go, and her sanity only deteriorates further the longer she stays at Hill House. The house seems to target the most vulnerable of people, and so it chooses Eleanor. Individuals who have experienced childhood trauma are more likely to experience trauma in their adult lives compared to those who haven't. This is reflected in Eleanor running from the arms of one abusive household to another. "Help, Eleanor! Come home, Eleanor!" is discovered on the wall in chalk. The ghosts seem to be making her feel guilty for neglecting her mother when she needed help. However, there is another interpretation of this text. Eleanor struggles to get along with the other participants. She is desperate for a home, a family, somewhere to belong. She imagines living with one of the other participants, Theo, and she gets angry when Theo doesn't fit into her perfect image. Eleanor thinks the other participants are immature, while she behaves with even less maturity than them. Personally, I think this is understandable behaviour for someone who has been abused their entire life. Regardless, her behaviour leads to her getting excluded from the group, and this shatters her mental state further. At first she is terrified by the house, but ghosts start whispering to her, and only her, which makes her feel special. "Help, Eleanor. Come home, Eleanor." Hi, it's me from the future. I feel like I was not super clear here, and I just wanted to say that my first interpretation of "Come Home, Eleanor" is that her mother's ghost has somehow followed her to Hill House and is trying to make her feel guilty for ever leaving home. And then my second interpretation of "Come Home, Eleanor" is that the ghosts want Eleanor to stay here, want her to feel like she belongs in this house, and make permanent residence with them. It's unclear whether she loses her sanity entirely or is possessed by a ghost, but she begins to climb unsafe steps in a trance-like state towards a spot where a previous inhabitant had hung herself. Another participant has to physically restrain her and carry her down before she can do any harm to herself. This leads to the experiment leader asking her to leave as she poses too much of a danger to herself and others. Reluctantly, she drives away, but as she nears the gate, she turns the car into the wall and kills herself. She tried to escape her childhood home in search of a place to belong. She could find family in no one but ghosts, who claimed her and ensured there would be no escaping this house. Unfortunately, the spectres of trauma can endure long after the abuse ceases. Ruth Franklin writes in a biography on Shirley Jackson, "Like an abusive relationship, Hill House is both impossible to remain in and impossible to escape." But I like to think that this book serves as a cautionary tale, that running away from your trauma will not eliminate it. Is there any way of escaping the house? House of Leaves by Mark Danielski might provide a solution. Now this book is quite difficult to explain. It's an ergodic book, meaning a book that requires exceptional effort to read it. This book is difficult to read due to its sprawling typography, out-of-order pages, and code to decipher. On top of that, it weaves together 3 different narratives. A man called Johnny Truant discovers the work of a blind man, Zampano, who is writing an academic text about a documentary called The Navidson Record, which is about a family who move into a strange house. I will start by focusing on Johnny, another character who was unable to escape the grasp of the house. Johnny experiences a lot of trauma as a child, and when he finds Zampano's notes, he becomes obsessed with trying to piece the story together. Now this is a bit of an aside, but I have to mention it because it's really slay. One day, Johnny is sat at a pub and he hears a band playing a song called 5.5 Minute Hallway, which is the same title as a short clip from the Navidson Record. What's really iconic is that the author's sister Poe produced an entire album based off this book, with a song titled 5.5 Minute Hallway.
I live at the end of a 5.5 minute hallway.
As Johnny involves himself more with Zampano's notes, he becomes paranoid and starts hallucinating. He relies harder on the coping mechanisms he's used before, sex and drugs. His story is left open-ended, but it doesn't look good for him to say the least. For Johnny, there is no escaping his ghosts. The story differs for the Navidson Record. This is a story about a family who discover that their home is 1/4 of an inch larger on the inside than it is on the outside. It gets weirder from there. The house shifts and distorts into impossible architecture and sprouts labyrinthine hallways, reminiscent of the back rooms. The father, Will Navidson, is a documentary filmmaker who desperately wants to explore the house. The mother, Karen Green, begs him to stay and to keep the door to the maze firmly locked. This difference of opinion causes their relationship to break down, and this affects their children, Chad and Daisy. At school, the children are asked to draw pictures of their homes. The drawings Chad and Daisy produced had no chimney, windows, or even a door. In fact, it was nothing more than a black square, filling 90% of the page. Furthermore, several layers of black crayon and pencil had been applied so that not even a speck of paper beneath could show through. The pain caused by their parents falling apart seems to amalgamate with the monstrous house. What should be a home is a solid black square, featureless and void of light. I believe that the house reflects everybody's trauma. As Will descends into the hallways, he's racked by the guilt of a traumatic memory. He refuses to face it, and he becomes stuck on the name, Thelial. Similarly, we are told that Karen experienced sexual abuse when she was younger, and the book itself comments on how locked doors in haunted houses can reflect vaginismus. The house reflects trauma by constructing maze-like hallways, which is mirrored in the confusing typography. The hallways and the text disorient both the characters and the reader, making it seem impossible to navigate. This feels similar to trauma, a non-linear construct with overwhelming twists and turns that make you believe there's no way out. In House of Leaves, a Minotaur is depicted as lurking at the center of the labyrinth. Interestingly, the word Minotaur is always written in red and crossed out. The terrifying beast lurking at the heart of this architecture could be symbolic of the repressed trauma one must face when wishing to escape the maze. The trauma the house causes is too much to bear, and Karen and Will separate. After a few days, Will decides to go back to the nightmare house to explore it entirely alone. Before we find out about what happened to the Neighbourson family, I want to tell you about a Doom 2 mod called MyHouse.wad. It's incredibly unassuming, reportedly a quick 10-minute game. The uploader of this mod said that they'd found it on a floppy disk belonging to their recently deceased friend. Although, the game was not complete and the uploader worked for months to finalise the game. And it is not a 10-minute game. In no uncertain terms, it is a work of art. You're led to believe you're playing an ordinary game, until you start to notice that some things don't add up. The architecture makes no sense at all. As you uncover more secrets, it gets trippier. You're transported to a hospital or an airport, all built with the same layout as the house. The attention to detail, which I'm only briefly explaining, gives me chills. And this part isn't relevant, but I need to show you this sick transition.
Refill needed. I don't know what I picked up. Oh! Whoa! Whoa!
After a while of being separated, Karen decides to return to the house. She finds it empty, besides the occasional ghostly knock on the walls, which turns out to be Will, still walking through the pitch-black corridors that twist time and space. Before going into the labyrinth, Will left a letter for Karen. He finally confronted his trauma and admitted his guilt of taking a photo of an emaciated child, Delial, right before she died instead of trying to save her. In return, Karen faces her fears and descends into the labyrinth to save Will. Unlike Johnny, they faced their fears head-on. They were able to make their relationship work, and they got their happy ending. Haunted houses teach us that once the trauma has been recalled, the ghosts can be laid to rest. In MyHouse.wad, there are numerous bad endings. You have to try exceptionally hard to get a different ending. It takes over an hour, you have to pay attention to so many little details, and experiment with trial and error, which adds on several more hours of game time, plus a ridiculously hard boss battle, until you finally reach a serene beach. A happy ending. The uploader attached the game with another file marked My Journal. There's a quote in there which serves as a fitting conclusion. Happiness has to be fought for. I wanted to include media with both happy and tragic endings because I don't want to invalidate the grueling aspect of trauma. Not everyone is able to have their happy ending. Not everyone is privileged enough to be able to go to therapy and to have the support of friends. And even then, it might not be enough to undo a lifetime of pain. But I still think that happiness is worth fighting for, even if it's just to experience the peace of one small, sunny moment. This has been my first video essay. It's been a lot of fun to make, but also very scary because I am very awkward. Anyway, all of the media discussed has made me feel very seen and validated, and if you can relate at all, then I hope you think I've done the topic justice. If you have any criticism, please feel free to leave it in the comments. If you have any of your own interpretations or anything else to add, please comment that too. I don't know anyone who's into the media I discussed, so please, let's hyperfixate together. Anyway, I really hope that you enjoyed this.